All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here for podcast number 51. All right, this one's going to be about fantasy and specifically a really good show we just finished. Yes, Berserk, the 1997 anime adaptation of Berserk. Specifically doing this now because the final episode is up on public access for everyone on YouTube. We also might be doing some manga reactions soon on our Twitch, which is up and available for you to see. So if you'd like to follow it, link is in the description below.
We haven't started doing anything on it yet.
We haven't launched it yet, but if you want to get in on that, go check things out. But before we talk about Berserk and fantasy in general with Berserk, we got to give a shout out to one of our VIP patrons, Kaleido Phoenix. Dude, you're awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate the really long messages you each sent us over Discord.
Those were awesome. First time we ever got one of those.
Actually. That was really, really awesome of you. So thank you so much for believing in us and encouraging us and supporting us. So.
For those of you who don't know, Kaleido Phoenix is one of our newest VIP patrons. And man, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go into a study in fantasy via Berserk, the 1997 anime.
And by the way, there are a whole lot of reasons why Berserk is an amazing show, an amazing story.
Yes.
We're not going to be going into those as much as we are, because that take forever. And you can watch our actual reactions,
watch that stuff. Watch specifically also the discussion side of things of our Berserk videos, because we talk about why Berserk as a story is really good. But this is we're going to be talking about specifically the genre of fantasy that Berserk, is involved in, is connected to. But
because we in general can get kind of starved for good fantasy.
This is true.
And Berserk scratched that itch, and it scratched it really well.
Really well.
And I don't know of any other anime that really does what Berserk does.
Yeah, Berserk is kind of in a league of its own, specifically on my viewing experience. I'm sure that there will be something out there that is similar.
Right.
But I have a very good feeling about how much better Berserk will get once we get into the manga. Due to just the fact that it has this legendary reputation. And the anime was this good.
And that's crazy because the anime came out in 1997. It was so good.
Yep.
Why haven't, there's the whole adaptation things and all that stuff, but why haven't we had more copycats? Like, a lot of times copycats don't do well. But,
we have, but we're all black swordsman copycats. Well, that's all.
Right. Yes,
and they're really bad, usually.
Well, and that's why we want to talk about this, because there are a lot of things that Berserk does that might go under the radar, but they are amazing.
They are amazing.
And they deserve praise.
And specifically in the fantasy aspect. So you do not have to worry about spoilers in this episode of the podcast, basically. Yeah. The only thing that we will come close to talking about direct plot-related stuff is the very first episode.
Right, and that's just like little details and stuff. We're not going to get into anything really crazy.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched Berserk, that's okay. We're basically going to shill to you why Berserk is a good fantasy.
If you're one of those people like us that loves fantasy and just wants there to be more good fantasy.
Yes, we're going to be talking about that. So Berserk overall handles the introduction of the world of Berserk very well. And also in a very dramatic way that most fantasy, I would say, kind of struggle with. Because there's that bridge of where you're a viewer and you are getting introduced to a whole new world. There's all these fantastical elements to it. There's all these things that you have to kind of get past your perception filter of what kind of makes sense, what doesn't.
What's normal, because you're creating this world from scratch. It's not like you can basically say it's like our world, but then but this is like the high school we're at, or something like that, right? Yeah. And a lot of times in fantasy stories, what authors will fall into the trap of, whether you're talking about actual books or like shows and things, is that they will end up dumping a lot of exposition and things at the beginning because they're wanting to make sure that you're on the same page. And that's good. But Berserk does something much better. They do very little exposition, and what they do is, when we say dramatic, it's not just the fact that some of the things that happen are dramatic, but the introduction itself is dramaticized.
Yes.
You are seeing the things happen.
Exactly.
And by that happening, you're then like, okay, now I don't have a perfect picture, but I'm starting to see.
Right. And I think that the first episode was probably a big risk for them. Because this is the one plot thing we're going to tell you, is that it is told out of order in the timeline of the story.
Right.
So the first episode does not happen at the beginning of the story. So what that means is that you're getting thrown into things with no real context, and there's a little bit of what could be considered conversational exposition.
Right.
A very little bit.
Yeah, but very, very little. It's done very well.
Yeah, it's very minor. So you're kind of just going, okay, I get the gist of it. But by bringing things in through this visual medium of anime, they're really banking on the dramatized aspect of introducing you to the world on working. And it does.
Yep.
And by the end of the first episode, I, for one, personally was very invested in not only the main character, but also the story that they were basically saying, we're going to tell this story.
Yep.
And we're starting off in a way that you probably have seen types of before, but not exactly like this.
Because one of the things that can make fantasy so tough is that it doesn't just have to introduce you to the world. That's the thing. It also, generally, at the beginning of stories, that's where you also want to tell the reader or the audience, or whatever medium it is, what your story's about. That way they know if they want to keep watching, keep reading, keep whatever, right? Keep consuming this material, keep living in this world that you've created with these characters that you've made. And because of that, because in fantasy and things like that, you have to not only introduce the world, but also introduce the conflict, that can get... that can get dicey. Tough. Yeah. That can get very dense, and a lot of things can go wrong because you're trying to pack it all in there. And one of the things that Berserk does is it says, we're not really going to worry about that much. We're going to make it so that we're just sprinkling things in there. That way you don't feel like it's getting forced down your throat, Yep. But you can still be like, all right, I get the style that they're going for. Yes. And then I'll get to see the details of everything as it continues.
Yes, and a lot of stories use in media res to try and hook the viewer with kind of asking questions as to how did we get to this place? What is the backstory? What is the things that happened previously? What are the context clues and questions and such? And I would say that this is one that works relatively well.
Oh yeah,
I could see in some ways with a critical eye, you go through this and go, that's actually probably a problem there, a potential problem there.
Whatever, yeah.
But the really big thing that they hit was they sidestepped that whole problem of exposition, of wanting to have a fantasy world that basically sells itself to its viewer early with a lot of proper nouns and a lot of things that you're not really looking for in the beginning.
And one of the things that is amazing about how they handle this, because one, with fantasy, that's derived from the word fantastical, all that stuff, right? It should instill this sense of wonder. Now, Berserk is more of a grimdark, and we'll get into that later.
To that, yeah.
But it's the idea that basically in the first episode it leaves mysteries, and if you were to go frame by frame, you could probably figure out a lot of the things that are going to happen. But that also works well with the in media res thing, because one of the usual problems with in media res is that then where's the conflict? Where's the tension? You know how it's going to go, at least to some degree, until you get back to that point where, that you saw prior, right? And because the first episode of Berserk leaves things so much in the air, you don't really get as much of an up-close and personal view of the main character. The main character, I don't think, is even introduced right away. So you aren't sure exactly how it's going to go. You just know some very vague details. And that helps a lot.
And this is almost doubly works really well with how they bring you into the second episode, which I'm now going to just completely cease all plot related stuff. They do a very good job of bridging the gap from in media res into the second episode. So when you then get introduced to the story, the characters, the general stuff that any kind of written or produced work for a story needs to have, they seamlessly blend it. Now, what this is also handled well with on the fantasy side of things is, I would say, kind of a little bit of a mini contrast already within the first and the second episode. Is that we are brought into a very medieval type setting, which is contrasted generally with most fantasy stories. I would say ever, specifically after one very impactful fantasy story that no one has ever read, Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Where it's all high fantasy.
Yep.
And Jacob, help break down a little bit, like, what's the difference between high fantasy and more low fantasy?
Right. Low fantasy, generally you can look at just like how common is magic.
Yes.
Right? How often is it presented in the story? What are people's responses to it and things like that? And oftentimes you can also look at the themes. A lot of times with high fantasy, you will have some sort of like supreme evil, darkness, whatever thing that must be railed against by the good guys, and it's good versus evil and all that stuff. Right. And you can have that in other types of stories too, but usually it's a lot more obvious in high fantasy. And with the case of, say, Berserk, it made it very clear that it was a fantasy in the first episode. Yes. The fantasy elements were in there, and they were very distinct, right? Yes. You know that, okay,
they were obvious, and they were right there.
This is a fantasy. But then when they shift over, it just looks like a medieval world. And,
right.
And you can totally do that. You can have them be both, but the fact that, like, even after the second episode, you go for a while and you're just like, wait a minute, where did the fantasy go? Like, I thought this was a fantasy. Where's all the stuff I saw in the first episode?
And we won't talk about, like,
what it is exactly.
What it is or anything like that.
But you have that question. But you know that it was there. They had that in the first episode, so you're like, okay, I know they are not going to completely forget about that. Right. And right now we're just dealing with this medieval stuff.
And the risky thing you would think, upon kind of hearing us talk about this, is like, well, wait, didn't they subvert expectations a bit too quickly by having there be fantasy elements and then pulling back and going into a fantasy, medieval, realistic kind of lack of magic setting? Well, no, because the way the first episode ends segues it perfectly. Well, and also,
at the beginning of each episode, they have a little reminder, a la like Full Metal Alchemist or Soul Eater, or things like that, where they have this little snippet that sets the tone for the story, which helps make it a great story.
Yes.
But it also reminds you, this is a fantasy.
Yes.
So, we haven't forgotten.
No.
Just wait.
And we're not going to talk too in depth about it because it's a thematic story function more so than a fantasy genre specific thing. But, however, we need to pay homage to it as it is a crux of the story and also the package that is Berserk.
Because when you do things like this and you say, fantasy stuff, and now we're going to shift, that can end up kind of pissing off your audience if they're like, I want fantasy. So the fact that you're saying, no, don't worry. We got it. There's a plan here.
It gives you also a feeling of, because we mentioned there's the grimdark element and stuff, it gives you a feeling of uneasiness. It gives you a feeling of kind of just...
Because you don't know.
You're a little bit tense. And there is an aspect of Berserk's themes that we could go into with that. But I like to contrast that with the high fantasy Lord of the Ring types, where things are much more binary, black and white, and things don't really occupy the gray area.
Right, you kind of know how things are going to go. Like things of how are the good guys gonna fare? They're probably going to do okay. There will be evil, but they will emerge victorious, right? And things like that.
Berserk makes the waters a little bit muddy and murky in regards to how things are going to progress plot-wise.
Which helps a lot with its character, centric aspects, which, again, that's a whole nother discussion, but it makes it so that it is unclear, which adds to the mystery, adds to the tension. It just does all of that stuff really, really well, and also adds to the grimdark aspects, because one of the things about grimdark is that you want it to be something that feels real, even though it's not, because it has like the fantasy aspects or whatever, right? So reinforcing the fact that no, these are basically just regular people that are having their day, but then you're like, wait a minute, what will happen when these regular people who, for all intents and purposes, believe they're in a medieval world, in a non-magic world, suddenly encounter the fantastical? How is that going to go? And it makes for some great anticipation and great payoff.
Yes. So specifically with the grimdark elements, this is where you have the characters in, say, like the exposition side of things needing to tell the audience how things are happening. In regular fantasy, telling about like how or what is happening, and grimdark, you basically just want to know, why is this happening? Because things are so dramatically different, especially in this medieval setting, than, say, what would be expected with just introducing regular magic.
Sure.
With grimdark fantasy, things can go for, I would say, like the weird abstract art kind of side of things.
And it's not clear cut. You can have grimdark, like when people approach fantasy, a lot of times people, or sorry, not fantasy, magic just in general, things that break the regular rules of physics. Sometimes they go for the, let's have a logical explanation and a system to it, and sometimes they go for the, it's just something you can't really understand type of aspect. You can do both for high fantasy and low fantasy and grimdark and all that stuff.
Mix it all up.
But Berserk likes to do the, you don't really understand it, and it works really well.
Because they set up that the medieval realistic side of things in the setting is such that all the characters believe that's the kind of world they're in. So anytime something is introduced like that, they have to either explain it. They either have to explain it away as like, oh yeah, that's no big deal. That's something small. It's nothing.
Or they're just like,
okay, what is that?
That's weird.
Like I don't understand it.
Right, and that helps basically. It makes them more relatable to the audience because that means that you can do things that the audience will find jarring and weird and just like, whoa, hold on, is that really happening?
Right.
And they'll feel okay, they'll feel safe because the characters are also feeling that way.
Yep.
One of the things that you don't want to do, like, or not, you can try and do this, but this is a dangerous aspect of fantasy type stories. Any story where you're creating your own world is that if it's too different and too weird, the audience can have trouble basically holding it in their minds and understanding what's happening, even if it's that they understand that they don't understand.
Right.
So the fact that you have these characters that also don't understand goes a long way.
Yes. And so you hear us talking a lot about the characters in this, specifically with how they are kind of the focal point for kind of understanding, reacting, and observing all the elements that range from kind of low fantasy, little bits of magic here and there, medieval stuff, to the, grimdark stuff. They are basically carried through the story as the viewer in certain ways. And I think that that's another way that Berserk handles fantasy really well, is that they'll have the full gamut of just experiences for our characters, and they respond uniquely to each one specifically based on their experiences with it. And generally speaking, they end up in the, we've never experienced this kind of thing before. Right. So Berserk is kind of also saying in a really meta way, you've never experienced fantasy exactly like this before.
One other thing that's really great is that in Berserk, the whole idea of it being a low magic setting, one of the things that does is it gives your audience basically chance to breathe. Because in the case of, say, like if you have something that's really, really foreign, really weird for the characters or the audience or whatever, and you have to basically have that happening often, it can lose its effect because you're like, okay, this happened last week, like why should this be any different? You'd think they would have adjusted by now.
What's the new spell we're going to learn this week?
Yeah, exactly. But because they make it so that it does feel so magicless a lot of the time, even though there's those undertones and themes and that little reminder before the opening that, hey, this is a fantasy, you get some really, really interesting lingering moments and stuff where you just realize, like, you forget sometimes.
Like, oh yeah, totally.
Like, you'll just be like, oh yeah, this is a cool medieval story, and then you'll be like, wait a minute, but I remember the first episode. What exactly is going on?
Right. So whenever you have a story that is kind of giving you a projection of the future like that, you're then also kind of realizing, okay, that has to happen at some point. That there's going to be some kind of a shift like that. It's something that I feel like in a lesser handled story would make there be a lot of the dramatic tension lost.
There whiplash and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Or whiplash, where you would then just feel like, I can't. I'm going to be snapped back out of it or something like that. This is something that, again, it's a story element, so I don't want to go too in depth into it. But Berserk handles that aspect of it with like mastery. And also specifically in the anime, I have to give credit to the directing abilities of the production staff for actually how they sequence specific events and showcasing character reactions and or just kind of ponderings of specific fantasy elements within the story when they happen, because they are specific and they are infrequent.
They are few and far between, but because of that, when they happen, you're like, ooh, and that's crazy.
And they really capture the humanity of it, and that brings back, I would say, full circle to the story where it started in the beginning, in that we have a dramatic introduction to a world that feels just like off in a lot of ways, but there's this realistic human side of it that is just perfectly captured. And I would say watch our Berserk discussions or Berserk reactions after you've gone through your full kind of viewing of the 1997 anime, or I don't know, go read the manga or something like that. But I mean, we're eventually going to get into it and stuff. But I cannot stress enough how well Berserk captures the blend of what I would say, I would say Game of Thrones is trying to do with that medieval transition into more like intense fantasy elements, and it just does it in this 25 episode just package.
And again, this is coming from two people who are often very, very starved for good fantasy.
Yes.
We have watched a lot of crappy, cheesy fantasy just because we wanted some fantasy. Right? And, like, Game of Thrones is probably the closest thing that we can compare Berserk to from the style of how...
In terms of recent stuff.
Yeah, in terms of recent stuff of the way it does the fantasy and things and all that. And I think that's such a tragedy.
It is.
Because... Game of Thrones, you can say, like, okay, that's HBO. They have so much money, they can do all kinds of that stuff, right? Yeah. But this was an anime made in '97.
With not a lot of, not that much money.
It comes down to it. The things that we could do with the amount of, like, production value that goes into anime nowadays and, and all that stuff, it's like, oh, man, like, we need more stuff like this.
Yeah,
like,
why hasn't there been another one like this?
Like, even if they're just imitations,
trying to rip it off or something.
They'd have to get some things pretty dang close.
Right?
And, so
if you haven't watched Berserk, if you haven't read the manga or anything like that, go do your research on which one, is probably going to be the best bet for you. You can just copy our experience as well and do the anime first and then go do the manga. I'm sure that most people would tell you do both.
Yeah.
At least, because you kind of owe it to yourself to get as much of this experience as you can.
Yep.
Again, we're not trying to give you any kind of plot specific things and stuff. If you are looking for some good fantasy with human centric drama, but with also the medieval kind of low fantasy aspects, and also the grimdark fantasy aspects, this is your show. This is your anime. There is probably nothing out there that comes close to this combination of elements.
If there is, please
please tell us in the comments.
Tell us.
Oh my gosh, please tell us. I'm sure there's something else out there, and there will probably be people in the comments being like, oh, that you haven't heard of this, and we're like, no, we haven't. So please tell us about it. We'd love to get into that. So leave us your questions in the comments. We'll answer them in the next podcast. And let's shift over into the Q&A section
of
the podcast here. First question is from Thomas Rasmussen, is asking, so does that mean that the podcast will be unavailable for people on YouTube because there's quite a big time zone difference, or will it still be uploaded here? Okay, so what Thomas is asking about was answered was talked about in our previous podcast about how the podcast will be moving over to Twitch eventually.
Right.
The main gist of it is that we're not 100% sure on that. It might be unavailable for people on YouTube, but you can still watch the VOD of it basically on Twitch when it shifts over there. So it will not be a thing where you have to catch it live in order to experience
it. Whether it's going to be on YouTube or Twitch, who knows, but we will make sure that you can still watch it even if you're not live.
Exactly.
Sen Ogino, I know you guys probably haven't read as much manga as you have watched anime, but what do you think are certain advantages that manga has over anime when it comes to storytelling?
Yeah, so that's the main thing I would go with this, is we haven't read much manga. He has read more manga than me. I've read almost none. So I would say that the main advantages it has are the same things that books have over movies. I would say that in general, you're able to get more into the heads of your characters. You're able to communicate in more flowery verbiage what is going on in the background. You can get the message sometimes more literally to your reader, whereas in a visual medium, you just kind of have to hope that they're paying attention to things in the background or something.
The other thing I would say is that, so whenever you see something that could be considered a weakness, think of how it could be a strength.
Okay.
So in the case of manga, what I think of is that, okay, what does it not have? It doesn't have emotion.
It doesn't have music.
It doesn't have music, right? Sure. Those are the two main things that I think about. So how could that be turned into a strength? One, it doesn't have motion. You are reading it at whatever pace you choose.
Oh, true.
That means you could have a lot better lingering moments and stuff like that with a much more potentially intimate feel because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
Right? One of my favorite manga is A Silent Voice, and that, not to say you shouldn't watch the movie A Silent Voice because it's amazing and the animation and the music is incredible, but they do something, it's a completely different experience because where in that one they use the sound to show what it's like to be deaf. Right. In the manga, there's no sound at all. So they do all kinds of different things, and it's really cool. That's awesome. If you haven't read the A Silent Voice manga, I would highly recommend checking it out for a better example, because I can only say so much.
Cool. Book Lover asks, what kind of music do you guys like to listen to?
A Silent Voice OST.
Yeah, I like to listen to a lot of the show soundtracks of the things we've reacted to and stuff. I have kind of a random assortment of songs I like to listen to.
Yeah.
I don't really have any specific things that I don't like to listen to other really than country music. I don't really like listening to just kind of depressing music with depressing lyrics. Mm-hmm. So I guess that has something to do with it. But I am more of a fan of anything that focuses on the music rather than the lyrics in general. What kind of live action TV shows do you like to watch? Well, I just watched True Detective Season 1 for the first time.
About that.
That is one of the greatest pieces of live action television ever. And guys, that is something where you just ask a question of what does live action have over anime? That show. The acting alone. This is something that, on-screen acting has over voice acting is body language, expression, and all these other things that, unfortunately, with technology or with budget constraints, you're not able to convey all of that through specific means there. Anime uses other tricks to try and make sure that you get that stuff communicated. But I really love in-depth character study live action TV shows.
One of the reasons why you should watch A Silent Voice, because it has a great budget and Kyoto Andy did a great job. So they do all the little subtle character movements animation. And body language.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. For me,
because it's a movie too.
Right, because it's a movie. I would say that I don't watch a whole lot of live action stuff. But this is one of those things that I just have to mention, and that is whose line is it anyway? You don't even need to watch it as like a show if you're thinking about it, because it's really more of just a game show. But it is so much fun. Yeah, where the rules are made up and the points don't matter. It's great. Just watch clips of it on YouTube if you have to. It's so good.
It's fun. Quasar TG asks, if you guys host a Twitch, do you plan on getting more mods to filter out the spam of spoilers? Yes, lots of them. And where can I apply for this? We'll let you know soon. What's actually behind that background wall of mystery? You don't want to know. Do you guys ever plan on traveling to Australia? You have a funny story about that.
I have actually already gone to Australia. That was 4 years ago now. Yep. I worked a bunch over the summer, had a bunch of money, and I was like, in between like college, and all that stuff. And I was just like, I'll do it because, I can do it now. And I went to, Whitehaven Beach. If you ever go to Australia, Whitehaven Beach is amazing. It is amazing, 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 amazing.
Yeah, so we'll see about international travel in the future. Who knows right now?
Yeah.
What is the most visually appealing anime you've seen? Well, recently we're watching Violet Evergarden.
Yeah, and that is
holy crap.
Kyoto Animation again, just flexing on all the other plebs out there.
Here's the other thing: if it's a movie, it has a little bit of a higher potential for just utilizing its budget effectively.
Yeah, like Your Name is gorgeous.
Your Name and A Silent Voice,
amazing.
I would say, are some of the most visually appealing.
As far as like shows, though, Violet Evergarden might take the cake.
Might take the cake right now. There's a lot of other shows out there that did a lot with what they had.
Yeah, like for their time and stuff, and they still stand up to this day.
Yeah, they still stand up. So I don't really have a specific answer for you, but Violet Evergarden is an easy choice because it's recent right now.
Yeah.
Is there any way to get you guys to 100% start a show?
No.
Well, no, but if you want us to experience some kind of media that you think is like something that just doesn't fit the format of our YouTube channel, send it to us in our P.O. box. So a lot of people have been sending us the Berserk manga to encourage us to do it. And we're like, we'll do it.
They also sent us the One Piece manga, which
They
is
also
ridiculous.
sent us the One Piece
but,
manga.
I mean, hey,
I wouldn't expect anyone to imitate that level of a gift and stuff. But someone also just decided, hey, like, this is a movie that I'm a really big fan of. And, you know, it's like a live action movie or something like that. It's like, yeah, you guys should really, like, I think you guys would really like that. And we're like, we'll check it out.
One thing about the whole idea of the 100% start a show, we want to make sure that we're getting as much as we can out of that show. That doesn't just mean the kind of show that it is and whether or not we will like it.
Yes.
That also means, are we in the specific mood in that time of our lives and stuff where that's the kind of show that we're wanting to watch.
Right. So we make sure that the shows that end up on the poll are curated from a large number of things that we are prepared
where we're like,
and ready to watch.
We feel like we could go for a show like that.
Yeah, I need to get my weeb level upgraded before I watch certain shows.
Right.
Yeah. Alan Santos asks, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, both of you guys end up hating a show. Oh, this is a very interesting discussion, given the previous question. That won the Patreon poll and has a lot of episodes and a lot of fans. Would you guys continue through it, even though you were clearly not enjoying it, or would you drop it? Well, the thing is that in this hypothetical scenario, we're kind of already screwed. But the thing is that this hypothetical scenario shouldn't happen ever, given the system that we have in place.
But if it did, one of the things that we tried to take as an approach to pretty much any show, because the thing is, all stories are different, right?
Yes.
You can never have that one story that is objectively perfect.
Yep.
As much as we subjectively want to believe that different stories are perfect, right?
Right.
So what we try and do is basically say, what is this story attempting, right?
Yeah.
What is it that they're going after?
What is their goal?
Right, exactly. That way we're not trying to compare, a mystery thriller to a high fantasy dragons and
it's a waste of our time, and honestly, we're not that smart to be critics.
Right. So we'll try and take what they're doing and see, okay, where are the things that they did do something well, even if as a whole maybe we don't like the show.
Right.
And then we would basically say, okay, and what I think we would do is we would basically turn it into, how could this show improve itself?
Better.
How could it have been better?
Yep.
What are the things that we think it was trying to do, and what do we think are the ways where it kind of had some hiccups that could have been smoothed out?
Yes. I think that we wouldn't drop it. We would continue it.
If it was something like stupidly long, like, 7 million episodes or something, then, I mean, why did we even let it be?
But that's why we're not going to react to what's a stupidly long show in anime? Naruto.
One Piece. Yeah.
One Piece. Yeah. We're not going to react to it.
Right.
Sorry, guys. It's just not going to happen.
We'd be like retired old men by the time we finished it.
Yeah. Next question is from Rakcha Krakcha. I love his name. Which has been the longest heated argument you have had during a discussion in a YouTube video? Checkmate, dudes. Oh, this was the person that asked the question of, just in general, and we were like, well, that was this 6 or 7 out of 10 for the SAO part 1. So in a YouTube video, we don't really know, because we don't go and count the minutes, or we don't have something in the back of our minds where we're like, oh, that discussion.
Yeah.
If anything, we just remember the longest.
Heated. Yeah, longest is easier to remember than heated, because usually, especially when the discussions get very long, if there's like an hour of discussion, there might be 10 minutes or 12 minutes that are heated, but then the rest of it isn't, so...
It kind of is something that we just don't know. Maybe what you should do is go watch all of our discussions and come back to us and find the one that you think is the biggest argument and give us like a clip, a timestamp.
Where would there be somewhere we would say we had some heated discussion?
I would say Hunter x Hunter discussion.
Sure.
MHA discussion. I'm trying to think of all the big discussions.
Maybe Psychopaths?
Maybe Psychopaths.
Yeah.
Where were the other big discussions? Monster. But Monster, we're pretty much in sync, like almost all the time, like because we're just in love with that show, guys.
That's
If you haven't gotten into Monster, our discussions specifically, I'm not just tooting our horn, but like his horn as well. Like we are gold. This show, just Monster.
Meanwhile, the Monster fans are just...
The Monster fans
they know what's going on.
The Monster fans are like, yeah, finally. Welcome to our world, you know. But yeah, I don't really know. Good, interesting question. Little Duck asks, so what are your guys' favorite and least favorite holidays, and why?
I know what my favorite one is right out the gate.
What's that?
Thanksgiving.
Oh, of course. You just
Epic
like to
meal
eat,
time.
You just like to eat food.
Oh yeah, I could talk for a long time.
We're such Americans.
Unlike how our family makes Thanksgiving just awesome with the food that's made.
That is true.
It's amazing.
I gotta give a shout out to food. Food is fantastic. Yeah. I really do like the aspect of kind of coming together for a meal and stuff. I really do like how that's very similar in how we celebrate Christmas as well. But the thing is, I've never really had a least favorite holiday. And the thing is nowadays there's so many holidays that people are coming up with. And I'm like, oh, is that a thing? I'm like, oh, okay. So my least favorite holidays are usually the ones that I'm like, wait, it's National Donut Day? Okay.
How can you have a problem with National Donut Day, Caleb?
Donuts, like I'll just go have a donut.
But just imagine for a second, big fat chunks of homemade stuffing, just mashed into mashed potatoes with good gravy dunked over it, and turkey and biscuits. It's like carbs on top of carbs on top of carbs on top of carbs
with some salt flavored
savory goodness,
gravy,
amazingness.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's amazing.
I don't really have a reason for a least favorite holiday. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. Also, if you guys had to spend Thanksgiving with a cast of characters from a show, which show would you want? And that means every major character in the show, including villains. Well, the trick of this is we choose a show with a very small cast of characters so they don't eat our food.
Villains. Well, yeah, that too.
Also, we get the ones with the cooking skills.
Cool.
So that they can
Sweetness and lightning.
Okay, Sweetness and Lightning.
That would be amazing.
Yet,
that would be wonderful.
But that's a wholesome show, right?
It's so wholesome, and it's a cooking show. And so yes, 120,000,000% Sweetness and Lightning.
Dang it! So I don't really know what mine would be.
Haikyuu?
I think I would just choose. Oh, Haikyuu.
Just so you can hang out with all the boys.
So I just hang out with all the boys.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we could basically just ask their families to like compensate for the fact that they're bringing them all there. So that's a lot of boys. There's like 100 characters.
But that's the thing
in that show.
If you have that many people, you could just say, "All right, guys, we're all gonna make this food, and we're gonna make it like fast because there's so many hands make light work."
We would just make it a week-long event.
Yeah.
And we'd all just be making food.
Well, I have only one day of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the thing is, though, they'd be weirded out by how old we are and stuff, but whatever. Next questions from Queen. Are there any dynamic duos that you genuinely get excited seeing them interact with each other? For example, for me, it's whenever Tanaka and Nishinoya talk to each other because I know I'm going to be laughing my butt off.
They are pretty OP as far as dynamic duos.
Yeah, dynamic duos that I just get excited seeing them interact. I think a lot of them are in Haikyuu, but I'm trying to think of others that are just...
Here's one.
Yeah,
this is a bit of an older one, but the Hound and Arya.
Ooh,
they were a pretty dang awesome dynamic duo.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, and I'm still holding out for a Longan Ava team up because I think that would just be such an odd couple, like, I think it would be amazing.
Crap, just genuine excitement. The thing is that a lot of the dynamic duos that I think of, I think about them interacting and I get goosebumps, but that's not excitement.
Okay.
So an example would be, and you might laugh at this one, but I actually get goosebumps with the Guts Griffith dynamic now.
Okay.
Because of watching Berserk. But the thing is that doesn't give me genuine excitement.
Sure.
So
okay.
with Haikyuu, there's something special about the characters that have this I would say passion that just kind of rubs off on each other.
Yeah, it's easy to have dynamic duos in Haikyuu, because, I mean, come on, it's Haikyuu.
So I would say one that kind of just gets me a little bit excited is kind of the Hinata Kenma one.
Okay.
Because it's kind of just letting more Hinata rub off on Kenma.
Sure.
But on another standpoint of things, I love basically any time that Hinata and Nishinoya are together and stuff, and they're just jumping with excitement and stuff. But
here's one that I forgot, and this was like the ultimate dynamic duo
I know
for me for a long time.
Rock and Revy.
Yep, Rock and Revy from
Rock and Revy,
yeah. I would watch entire seasons of that show, even
yeah.
when I didn't like how the show was at that particular point, just because I was like, okay, there will probably be one or two awesome interactions between Rock and Revy over the course of the season, and I want to see them.
Yep, that is true. Next question's from Void. What scares you the most besides spiders? Should I get existential here, or should I just...
Eclipses?
You didn't answer my question. Should I get existential here?
Sure. Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to if you were.
Okay, then you start then.
The unstoppable march of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, it's weird, but you realize that, like, your time is limited. The thing I'm most scared of in terms of, like, the irrational fears is actually a very funny one. So there's a spinning top, and I have my toe balancing on it, standing off, but that's basically just like the most terrifying visual for me.
What?
Okay, yep. I mean, I got that out of the way. Yep, it's weird. Now, my actual probably like worst fear is just simple simple disconnection. Basically, the idea of having all this opportunity for connection and not actually having any.
Gotcha.
So being just completely separate.
Like alone?
Alone is an aspect of it, but the thing is this is the loneliness in a crowd. This is this is the loneliness in the mass kind of. This is being bombarded with information and data and energy, but not feeling actually connected.
So how much percentage-wise would you say that matches up with the Leading Lives of Quiet Desperation? Or is that
not as much?
Not
yours
as much?
is a purpose. Yours is a
yeah, that's true. That's
fear.
more of mine type thing.
Mine is way more relational.
Gotcha.
In that aspect. But yeah, that's reveal our deepest, darkest fears. Yep. There you go. Antonio Roja Cortez, love your questions, dude. This is specifically for Jacob. So
hey,
go
Jacob,
on.
how do you deal with continuity for your book? How do you keep track of the details of every character's appearances, personalities, decisions, and so much more, so you don't contradict your story?
That's a great question.
Well, that is an excellent question. The first draft, and this is how I've been told happens a lot with writers, was kind of me just getting to know the characters.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that happened, because I'm a sadist or a masochist, and because of how I decided to write the story, a lot of it is based on the characters, right? So that means if some slight thing changes, that can change how the characters are thinking, feeling, and all that stuff at that point, which means everything after that suddenly needs to be changed. Which is wonderful. And lists are good. I don't do them as much, but I generally have a really good long-term memory. If I can get it into long-term memory, like work with the variables and stuff, I tend to remember it.
Cool.
But yeah.
Good question, though. Thank you. Moonstone Pearl asks, what are some of your biggest turnoffs in storytelling? Oh, boy. I'm gonna delve into to the deep dark areas. Of stories that I actively hate. You go for it.
Here's okay. I'll talk talk about a specific turnoff.
Okay. I can probably do that then. The biggest ones, actually.
Shirley and Code Geass, season 2. I
love that this turns you off so much. Basically, he hates the idea of a character getting brought back into the story to have their plot be resolved.
Right. Well, no. Unresolving their plot when it was resolved in my mind so that they could do something else that in my mind is a detriment to their character.
Yep.
That's what really grinds my gears.
To boil it down even more, it is sacrificing a good character for the sake of your story. The
when
thing
that
is,
character was already done and out and safe and should have just been not touched at all.
Yeah, minor Code Geass spoilers, though, guys. A bit late for that, but
wow, both talking about Code Geass. Oh, a particular character in Code Geass?
No, actually, no. I don't really
Rip
have
Table
any...
Kun?
Yeah, I don't have any huge turnoffs in storytelling in Code
Okay.
Geass. The main thing that I would say is my kind of specific type of turnoff in storytelling is basically that main character that...
Oh, yeah.
I can kind of just bring... It's like,
wet bread.
Yeah, basically a really poorly executed main character that has the entire story banking on them, and they are about as bland and non-existent of a character as a wet piece of bread. Yeah. I really don't like... I could talk about the stories that actively like make me like hate humanity, and it's basically those stories that are average. Those stories that are average. But the thing is that they have their concept and they have their potential.
And it's like you had every reason to be incredible. Why aren't you?
But then you dumped all of this weight of the story being good onto a main character that was literally the least inspired, the least effort put into part of this story. Like, literally, you had 5 side characters that were 10 times as interesting, yet you put no weight onto them for no reason, really, other than maybe to sell something or whatever. I basically hate the bastardization of a story and character for the sake of, I don't know, convention? I don't really know how to describe it.
I mean, that's probably when it comes down to it, what my peeve was with Code Geass, that we talked about.
Well, that's a very hyper-specific variable of that.
Yeah.
Mine is just specifically the main character, because then it
totally
tanks the entire story.
Yeah.
There's so many stories out there, I think, that have specific main characters that are actively ruining their own story by existing in this manner. And literally all you'd need to do is remove them and
the story
put
would be
any
great.
Side character into the focus, and the story would be much better.
No, because it's like all the rules that people that are there that the creator will understand for the side characters, giving them motivation, giving them development, giving them growth. All of that stuff is basically just left by the wayside when it comes to the main character. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. Like that whole idea of the horrible, bland, wet bread main character can get thrown around a lot of the times when it's not truly deserved.
That's true.
But when it's there and it is actually that bad...
Oh... Nothing makes me want to like punch puppies more than like that. Like, no, like actually, because generally the story around it is pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the thing that makes it suck. Yeah, because
these are metaphorical.
Yeah,
metaphorical story puppies.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Final question is from Roxy T. How do you go about your writing process? Do you develop characters, setting, or story first? Also, how do you deal with writer's block and or lack of motivation continue writing on a current project? Oh, these are fantastic questions.
They are awesome.
First one is, how do you go about your writing process, and do you develop character, setting, or story first? We both are very different in this. I would say that I go for characters first, and you go for setting first.
No. I go for... what I usually do is I go for ending first. And I say, what do I want to be the thing that is left in their minds that they remember from this story, right?
Nice.
How do I want this story to stand out? And then how do I do that with all the other things? And I usually then start with the characters and the story, a little combination of the two.
Okay. I am hard character focused on my thing there. But the thing is that I have not created work to my name in the story arena. So my writing process isn't one that has that proof of work.
Of concept?
Yeah, proof of concept. So I wouldn't necessarily follow me. And
I
maybe
mean, starting with the characters is great.
Draw inspiration in that characters are the thing that should be, I think, the most important part of your story.
The characters are the story.
Yes. If there is any doubt in your mind about that statement, about what he just said, might want to go and do a little bit more looking into that, because it's true.
Yeah.
Try and writing a characterless story.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. And then as far as writer's block and lack of motivation, that happened. Okay, so this is something this is what I tell myself, and this is what I will tell you. Because I of course have trouble. I think everyone has trouble with this.
Does.
And then people have different ways of getting over it, and that's what makes it different, right?
Okay.
But for me, it is basically that the very fact, the very getting over it itself, that is what separates the published writers, the writers that people know about, from the ones that no one knows about and no one's read their story, and it just disappears into the ether. So
it's a sad reality of that. If you want your story to be told, you kind of need to go through this.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're going through it means that's
cool.
You're
good. That means you're on the right track.
You're
so
getting the opportunity to
Yep.
be one of these people. I look at any kind of published author or writer now, and I have the biggest respect for them, because that means that at some point, even if this book for them was easier, at some point they had to practice their brain, their soul even, into just grinding out the hours
when they don't see the end of the tunnel,
and weeks without seeing the end of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it is insane.
So it's insanely hard. I would say that basically you kind of have to just tap into whatever is in front of you. If you have a song that pumps you up, you play the song. If you have some food that gets you hyped, or gets you into the mood, you eat that food. Right. If it means you have to go punch the ground outside, you punch the ground outside. You go do whatever it takes,
because
you don't let doing the thing being like, I can't do that.
Right.
You kind of have to do that. I mean, within legal reasons and stuff.
But the idea is that just write. It doesn't really matter what it is you're writing. Just keep writing. If it's not that great right now,
that's good
fine.
Thing.
But just keep writing, because that's how you actually get it done. Otherwise, you very well could be here forever, and that is a dark, scary place to be.
It's a very depressing place. I would say also, this is something that I learned from journaling, was just write literal nothing. You can write nothing. Like, you realize that, like, the act of actually physically doing the writing, if it's on a keyboard, it's still the same thing. There's still a physical act involved. But actually doing it trains your brain to being like, this is normal. Doing this for hours and hours is normal. And the thing is, I've literally written out streams of consciousness to get myself back into writing, actual creative writing. And it works actually.
Like, think about
most of the time.
Yeah, like there are times when you have to be like, okay, I need to come up with some plot point or how this is going to work or whatever. But most of the time, what I've found is that once I actually start writing and I'm actually writing and stuff, then it'll be fine. And even if I had like a horrible day trying to get writing done throughout the entire day, and then it's 10 p.m. and I finally am able to start getting a little bit done, then suddenly, okay, now it's going, now it's flowing, and it's way easier to keep writing than it is to start writing.
Yes.
So,
well said.
Yeah.
So keep writing.
And if you're not writing, that's fine. Just start. And even if it's not good, that's fine. Just start. And then you'll keep writing. And as you keep writing, you get better at writing, which makes it easier to stay writing, easier to start writing, and makes it so that you're more happy with the things that you do write. So go. You've got this.
I'm inspired now. So guys, like, go write, go create, go make something, go build
this doesn't
something.
necessarily just apply to writing. Any kind of creative thing that you're doing.
Yeah. Go do it. Go do it fast. Go do it badly.
Yeah, fail.
Yeah.
Fail hard. Fail head first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fail forward.
And actually, I'm going to have a call to action here. Share your comments on this podcast with your experiences of what happened when you tried that. And if you don't want to share exactly what happened because it's a little bit vulnerable, that's fine. But if you want to be vulnerable and stuff and ask us questions, like we'll totally be there for you and ask the questions and stuff. We love you guys. You guys are awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the podcast if you're one of those few folk. But yeah.
Few, the proud.
Yes, exactly. The Q&A questionnaire viewers, yes. But if you want to ask us questions and have them answered in a future podcast, again, leave them in the comments down below and they will get put there. If your question doesn't get answered, that means it was probably something along the lines of, when will you watch this? Or
something we've already answered.
Something we've already answered.
You know.
So check through our podcast playlist. Some of the themes of the things in there sometimes correlate to the question.
Sure.
So you might see a specific question pop up there. But yeah, guys, we'll see you in the future podcast. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.